This week on Jerusalem Dateline, Blue Flag 2021, Israel's biannual exercise brings together the best air forces in the world, filling the skies over the Negev desert. Plus, the U.S. and Israel confront each other over the future of Jerusalem. And a rare find gives a glimpse into ancient times. And for the first time since COVID-19, runners fill the streets of the city in the Jerusalem Winter Marathon. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Controlling the skies is a top priority in war that often takes help and cooperation among allies, especially when enemies also join forces. Israel knows about that need and organized a multinational aerial exercise called Blue Flag 2021. One goal of this exercise is to send a message to enemies in the Middle East. That's the sound of some of the world's most advanced fighter jets filling the skies over Israel. The Blue Flag 2021 exercise here in the Uvda base in the heart of the Negev desert is Israel's largest, most advanced exercise. And as it says, they bring together side by side, wing to wing, the best air forces in the world. This allied force includes the U.S., Greece, Germany, India, France, Italy, and for the first time, the U.K.
This is a great opportunity for Israel, again, to show how we do cooperation and why we do it. 7 different countries come to Israel, to this beautiful land, to train together and see how we can do things better.
The challenge is merging different countries, aircraft, and tactics into one cohesive unit to fight a common enemy. This unidentified Israeli pilot flies the F-35.
I mean, it's such different. Their Air Force are different than ours, and it's so nice to see how things are going in different places and different experiences and different feelings. But we learn a lot from that, both in the professional side and in the personal side.
It's a fantastic experience, learning the different tactics and philosophies of how they like to operate the mission. And from there, especially me as a younger wingman, learning just see different other perspectives and experiences within the fighter community.
In addition to personnel, a main goal is incorporating aircraft, such as bringing the latest F-35 Joint Strike Fighter alongside older F-15 and F-16s. Then, as the pilots take off over the Negev desert, their motto becomes, "Fights on."
Fights on is just a brevity term used to tell everyone, hey, we're about to start tactically maneuvering, so prepare.
Germany has joined the biannual exercise several times. That's key given the troubled history between the two countries.
Over the last years, we've developed really close relationships. It's the 3rd time that we're participating in Blue Flag. Also, last year we had an Israeli squadron at our base for an exchange. So for us, coming here now is really a very special event. It's so special that we even painted one of our Typhoons with special colors representing the German and the Israeli flag.
While the camaraderie is important, Israeli officials are constantly reminded that they operate in the world's most dangerous airspace. A senior IDF official tells CBN News, over the past few years, Israeli warplanes have been fired upon more than 1,000 times while attempting to stop the spread of Iranian influence on Israel's borders. This gathering also saw an historic development with the attendance of a special guest. The visit of the Air Force commander from the United Arab Emirates represents a quantum leap in cooperation between former Middle East enemies.
It's a very significant visit. The Abraham agreements open a variety of, let's say, opportunities in the region to collaboration and cooperation between countries that we didn't flew with them for the last 75 years. It's a signal of stability and also a force demonstration.
That sends a clear message of deterrence to Iran and other enemies in the region.
So we believe that the cooperation of different countries, both in the region and globally, that share the same interests and the same values, can really promote the stability of the region. And by showing that we are here cooperating and are oriented to that goal, we believe can bring more stability to the region.
While the U.S. and Israel are cooperating over the skies, their relationship on the ground is hitting a snag. The disagreement is over the Biden administration's desire to reestablish its consulate for the Palestinians in Jerusalem. Some say the move not only contradicts American law, but some see it as an attempt to redivide the city. When the U.S. says it wants to reopen a consulate for Palestinians in Jerusalem, Israeli leaders say, not on our watch. The building behind me served as an American diplomatic mission for more than 100 years. In 2017, the United States recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and the following year moved its embassy to the city. In 2019, the Trump administration merged the consulate with the embassy. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken says it's time to change that.
The United States will be moving forward with the process to reopen our consulate in Jerusalem. That's an important way for our country to engage with and provide support to the Palestinian people.
The proposed action would reestablish the consulate in Jerusalem, independent of the U.S. Embassy and ambassador to Israel. Professor Eugene Kontorovich says such action would be a big victory for the Palestinians.
It's a sign to the Palestinians that America recognizes Palestinian claims to Jerusalem. Instead of recognizing Israel as Jerusalem's capital, we'll be putting a question mark on that.
Palestinian Authority Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh welcomes the move and that message.
The message from this administration is that Jerusalem isn't one city, and that the American administration does not recognize the annexation of Arab Jerusalem by the Israeli side. We want the American consulate to constitute the seat of a U.S. embassy in the state of Palestine.
Danny Danon, former Israeli ambassador to the UN, calls the decision unnecessary.
If they want to provide services for the Palestinians, they can do it in Ramallah, in Jericho, in Nablus, in many other locations. The U.S. decided to move the embassy to Jerusalem, and I think we should all respect it.
The Biden administration can't reverse the recognition of Jerusalem because it's too bipartisanly popular. What they're trying to do is just partially reverse it or turn back the clock to how things were before America recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital.
In 1995, Congress passed the Jerusalem Embassy Act, calling for the city to be recognized as Israel's undivided capital and to move the U.S. Embassy there. It allowed the president, however, to invoke a security waiver to postpone the move. And beginning with Bill Clinton, each president did until President Trump. Senators James Lankford, Bill Hagerty, and other leading Republican senators have introduced a bill to protect the 1995 Jerusalem Embassy Act. In a statement, Lankford says their bill ensures future administrations uphold the law by keeping our embassy in Jerusalem and preventing other U.S. consular posts from being established in Jerusalem. Biden's intentions to ignore existing law does not bring the region closer to peace. It only undermines our recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Under international law, Professor Kontorovich says Israel can legally stop the move, although the State Department is pressuring it to give in. Some would say while the U.S. calls Israel a friend, its actions indicate otherwise.
There's no other country where the United States tries to coerce them to have a diplomatic mission to a foreign entity, a hostile foreign entity, in their capital.
Another contentious issue between the U.S., Israel, and the Palestinians is Israel's decision to designate 6 Palestinian human rights organizations as terror entities. Israel's Ministry of Defense says the 6 groups operate as an organized network under the leadership of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, or PFLP. The U.S., along with Israel and its allies, consider the group to be a terrorist organization.
The decision was made on a factual and legal basis after this issue was examined in the Ministry of Justice, and in this sense, it relies on a solid basis.
The Palestinian Authority condemned the move, and Palestinian activists from the groups called on the international community to help reverse the decision.
Closing the organizations and declaring them as a terrorist organizations, which it will affect their work on a daily basis. They will affect their programs. They will affect their stuff.
The U.S. stopped short of condemning Israel, but State Department spokesman Ned Price said Israel gave the U.S. no advance warning.
We'll be engaging our Israeli partners for more information regarding the basis for these designations.
Israel's internal security apparatus says the groups constitute a lifeline for the PFLP, raising funds and money laundering, employing and financially compensating terrorists, and facilitating the recruitment of activists to the military arm of the PFLP. According to the Israeli daily Haaretz, Representatives of Israel's Shin Bet Security Services and Defense Ministry headed to Washington to present Israel's evidence that the groups are indeed connected with the PFLP. Olga Deutsch, Vice President of NGO Monitor, says her organization has been trying to show the connection between humanitarian groups and terror organizations like the PFLP for years.
Increasingly over the years, we have seen connections. They go to conferences, they share the same platforms. They have Shawan Jabarin, the head of Al-Haq, which is one of the most prominent Palestinian human rights groups, representing PFLP in many formal meetings.
Deutsch says the paradox is that the Palestinian people are the victims of the scam. Instead of being served by true human rights groups, their needs are hijacked for political and terrorist causes. Coming up, the alarming rise of anti-Semitism in the U.S. and the world, and what can be done about it. The American Jewish Congress published an alarming survey that said 40% of Jews in the United States are afraid of anti-Semitism. We addressed the impact of this report on the Jewish people in the U.S. and around the world with Israel's former ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danone, in our Jerusalem studio.
Unfortunately, it's true. Anti-Semitism is on the rise everywhere. In the US, in Latin America, in Europe for sure, we cannot ignore it. According to the FBI, when you look at the number of hate crimes within the US in the last year, you see that the numbers are moving up and up. We have to take actions. We have to demand more enforcement, more legislation, and I think every Jew all over the world should feel safe and should be able to practice his Judaism.
Yeah, what's the cause, do you think, behind this rise in anti-Semitism, not only in the U.S. but around the world?
When you look on the social media today, you see that it's being used to promote hatred against Jews, and that's why the numbers are going up and up.
And how can we combat that? How can Israel combat that?
I don't think it should be only Israel. I think it should be a joint effort. And I call and I demand from the leaders of those countries to take actions. You know, they all speak very nice, condemning anti-Semitism. The question is what they are actually doing about it. How many indictments? How many convictions? You know, last May, when we were engaged in fighting the terror attacks coming from Gaza, we saw many incidents in the streets of New York, in the streets of Los Angeles. What happened after that? Those people were not convicted yet. So I think we should demand more actions from the leaders, not only declarations.
One organization or movement I think you could see where anti-Semitism has found a place is called the BDS movement. How would you describe the BDS movement and what danger does it pose to the state of Israel?
It's not politically correct to say that you are anti-Semite. So they found a new way of anti-Semitism and they call it BDS, boycott Israel. This is the same anti-Semitism we saw in the past. We are fighting BDS. We are doing it together with organizations all around the world. And we should make it very clear. Those who boycott Israel should be boycotted themselves. I think if those people will know that they will have to bear the cost for boycotting Israel, they will think twice about it.
Yeah, we're talking about anti-Semitism. Maybe the most anti-Semitic country in the world is Iran. Where would you gauge the status of the possibility of the U.S. going back into the JCPOA, the Iranian nuclear deal?
It was a bad deal 6 years ago. It is a bad deal today. I hope the U.S. will not make that mistake again. And look what happened in the last 6 years. They enriched more uranium. They developed the ballistic missile technology. They're sending billions of dollars to their proxies. It will be a major mistake if the U.S. and the P5 will actually join this agreement. And the Iranians are playing with the war today. A few weeks ago they said soon, Chris, they said soon we will go back to the negotiations. What happened since? Nothing. I think they should know that there is strong actors who are willing to face the aggression coming from Iran. We in Israel, we are preparing for all options. When you look at the budget of 2022, you will find the budget line that we are putting there to get ready for all options.
All options meaning military option?
Including military option, absolutely. We cannot allow Iran to become nuclear. We cannot take the chances of Iran threatening Israel. And you know, I just came back from the UAE a few hours ago. I heard the same voices from leaders in the Gulf. they are also very concerned about the fact that the Iranians, God forbid, will reach a nuclear capability.
And talking about the UAE, the Air Force commander of the UAE visited here in Israel. That's unprecedented. What does that tell you?
We have strong friends and real friends in Abu Dhabi, and we are collaborating in many aspects. And I think, now you see it's 1 year since the signing of the Abraham Accord. Look at what we accomplished in 1 year. It's amazing. We are very blessed to have the peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan. But look what we achieved in 1 year, the number of tourists, the number of the economical cooperation agreements that we signed. And also military cooperation, like you mentioned, we are seeing the results now.
Up next, archaeologists find a rare and precious gem that gives clues into ancient Israel. Just north of the city of David, archaeologists believe they have found the first of its kind engraving on a precious gem. And as CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl tells us, the engraving is a biblical plant known to many as the balm of Gilead.
Deep underground in a 2,000-year-old drainage ditch next to Jerusalem's western wall, archaeologists say a rare artifact from Second Temple times was uncovered.
It's a stone seal made of semi-precious amethyst stone with an engraving of a dove and a branch of a tree with fruit on it. And what was surprising was that it's a branch with fruits that are not recognized with other seals from that period.
The seal would have been mounted on a ring. It was found while archaeologists and volunteers were sifting the remains from the drainage ditch at the Emek Tzurim National Park, operated by the City of David.
Once we found the seal with the branch and the fruit, we hypothesized that it was the biblical persimmon fruit plant as mentioned in the Bible and in the sources of the Second Temple and the Byzantine periods.
The biblical persimmon plant is not related to the orange persimmon fruit of today. Instead, it was known in ancient times by several names: bosom, balsam, and the balm of Gilead.
Jerusalem's primary drainage channel was built under the pilgrimage road. The pilgrimage road started from the Shiloach pool in the city of David and went up to the temple of the Second Temple period. Apparently, this ring with the seal fell into the drainage ditch 2,000 years ago.
For 1,000 years, ancient Hebrew farmers were the only ones in the world known to cultivate this exotic plant, using it for medicinal and cosmetic purposes. Guy Ehrlich has been working to revive that biblical agriculture and is the only one in the country growing that biblical persimmon. That's why archaeologist Eli Shukrun took the stone to Ehrlich's farm for him to see.
It's just amazing. Someone took a branch of the balm of Gilead and drew it on the stone. It does not remind me of any other plant I know.
Biblical and historical sources also say it was used during the Second Temple period as one of the more expensive ingredients for producing the temple incense.
This is the same persimmon that is identified with the biblical persimmon. It is the persimmon that served as the first of the incense ingredients of the temple and as the anointing oil of the kings and priests.
Ehrlich has some 10,000 balm of Gilead trees. He markets perfume and essential oil from the trees. He also grows frankincense on his plantation.
There is a wall-to-wall agreement that this is the plant, but there is little graphic depiction of it. And what you have brought me now is really a greeting from history. I felt like someone wrote me a note with a drawing of the fruit of my persimmon plant and sent it to me.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic struck, runners filled the streets of Jerusalem in its annual marathon. Runners filled the streets of Jerusalem during its annual marathon, the first since the COVID-19 pandemic limited activities. Julie Stahl talked to some of the runners at the starting line. Take a look.
Some 20,000 runners participated in the 10th Jerusalem Winter Marathon. Jerusalem Mayor Moshe Leon was one of them.
It's very special and it's very exciting.
Usually held in March, the 2020 marathon was canceled altogether and 2021 was postponed until now. But everyone was glad to be back after a year and a half of COVID-19 restrictions and lockdowns.
My son and my grandchild, they are running today. Almost 2 years that we are closed in the house with all this disease. It's wonderful to see that. I'm full emotion. I'm telling you the truth. It's lovely to see that.
The marathon usually draws runners from around the world, but due to COVID-19 travel restrictions, there weren't as many this year. Still, there were some, like Shoshana and Brian Allen from New Jersey.
We're excited to be here, outdoors, seeing people again, and it's wonderful.
Feels great. It's good to be back. Get everything back to normal.
So excited. I think it's so important, and I'm so excited to do it. It's incredible. Everyone around here is Jewish. It's like everyone's family.
And Claude Ganor has a special message.
Sports are not just for the winners, but for everyone who comes and participates and gets involved. For 10 years already, we're giving the Victory Cup to the last person who finishes.
And nothing could compare to running in Jerusalem.
Jerusalem is something special. I don't know what to say, but it's the atmosphere is different than the other places that I've been before.
I think it's amazing to run in the places we can actually read about in the Bible. I mean, you walk in the Bible, you run in the Bible. That's the path that God gave us, and it's amazing to do that in a marathon.
Jerusalem, you know, it's been a Jewish nation for many, many, many years. When you walk around and see the history, and it just gives you the adrenaline to continue running. You know that our ancestors have ran here before, and now we're running.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, the Jerusalem Winter Marathon.
Well, hopefully next year, runners from around the world will return to the city for this extraordinary event. That's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And don't forget to sign up for our email blasts so you can continue to receive all of our exciting CBN content. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.